By means of a footbridge, the modern visitor crosses over Hathaway Brook into a grove of trees associated with the first vision.
Joseph said that early in the spring of 1820, as a 14-year-old boy, he went to a clearing which he had previously chosen and found the stump where he had struck his axe when he had quit work the day before. There he knelt and prayed.
Now Joseph wrote 4 accounts that we have found of the first vision. He might have written other accounts. When you consider the persecution of the saints, the movement of the people, it's incredible that we have as many records that have been preserved. But there are 4 accounts which he wrote, and in every account there's concepts that are not found in other accounts. If you really want to fully understand what happened in the Sacred Grove in 1820, you need to examine every one of the accounts.
Our knowledge and understanding of the events in the first vision come from actually several different accounts or recordings from the prophet Joseph Smith, 2 of which were written more as histories. One was a biography type history, maybe history of the church, that Joseph began in 1832. Another one was his official history of the church that he began in 1838. Another of those accounts the prophet Joseph Smith gave to John Wentworth, who was an editor for the newspaper The Chicago Democrat in 1842. And then a 4th is written in the official history of the church that was provided on the 9th of November of 1835 when a man named Robert Matthews came to visit Joseph Smith, and he shared with him some details. In addition to that, we have other individuals who had heard Joseph Smith bear his testimony regarding what had taken place in the grove on that early spring day. Both Orson Pratt and Orson Hyde produced missionary pamphlets for those in Great Britain and in Germany and published accounts of the first vision. Others had them in their personal journals. 2 examples of that would be Levi Richards and Alexander Nabar, who lived in Nauvoo, Illinois, and in 1843 and 1844, then they recorded in their journals things that Joseph had shared with them. And then David Nye White, who was an editor of the Pittsburgh Weekly Gazette, interviewed Joseph Smith in his home in Nauvoo in August of 1843, and from that interview then he later included an account of the first vision as part of his news article. Now, taking all together, we do have a bit more detail than maybe members of the church are often familiar with.
I remember that on one occasion I was invited to tell the story of the first vision to a group of primary children. I arrived at the primary and the teacher said, "Now the attention span of the children is not very long. I would like you to describe the first vision in 2 or 3 sentences." Oh boy, that's interesting. And then on the same day I was invited to give an hour lecture to the high priest on the first vision. Now certainly what I said to the high priest was something very different to what I said to the children. If you relate the story of the first vision to a group of people who've never before heard of Joseph Smith, it's going to be very different than if you're going to talk to people who are members of the church. So when you consider the circumstances of the accounts, when you consider the audience, the time period, you'll notice that they are very different. They're all very significant, but very different.
As he began to pray, a real being from the unseen world exerted power to prevent him from speaking. Thick darkness gathered around him, and he feared that he was doomed to destruction.
He indicated that this adversary made strenuous efforts to try to prevent him from praying. For example, Orson Hyde, in the pamphlet that he had written for those saints in Germany, indicated, and we take it must be accurate that Joseph had told him himself, that he tried to just cool the fire in Joseph's soul from praying, but he did so by bringing improper images to his mind and to his thoughts, and filled his mind with all types of doubts. In his journal, Warren Parrish records that Joseph told Robert Matthews that when this power came upon him, he tried to escape it by trying to pray again, but he couldn't, and he heard a noise of walking behind him, and it seemed to draw closer to him, and so he sprang up on his feet and looked around himself to see what could possibly be producing that noise of walking. And then he himself indicated that he began to pray again and that he could be delivered from this power that was holding him bound.
Joseph recorded that just at the moment he was ready to sink into despair, I saw a pillar of light exactly over my head, above the brightness of the sun, which descended gradually until it fell upon me. As the light drew nearer to him, the whole wilderness for some distance around was illuminated in a most brilliant manner, and Joseph expected to have seen the leaves and limbs of the trees consumed by the light. The light continued to descend until it rested upon the earth and surrounded Joseph. Within this light, God, the Eternal Father, appeared with another at his side. The Father, calling Joseph by name, pointed to the other personage and said, "This is my beloved Son. Hear him."
When Joseph was speaking to Robert Matthews in 1835 regarding the first vision, he described better the feelings that he had when the light appears that releases him from this power that was trying to prevent him from praying. And he indicated, he says, when it rested on him, it filled him with unspeakable joy. And then it continued to slowly come down upon the earth. And Joseph says, I was enveloped in the midst of this light. So I know sometimes we might imagine there's this pillar of light that comes down and that Joseph's outside the pillar of light, looking in the pillar of light. And as Joseph described it, he's within that light. And when Orson Pratt, in his pamphlet to the saints, they're mostly in Scotland, the way he described Joseph's account is that it produced this peculiar sensation throughout his whole system, and that natural objects and the things that were around him, his mind was caught away. Regarding the idea that there were two personages that appeared in the light, once again, in his account that he gives to Robert Matthews in 1835, in this little interchange those two had, he's more specific in indicating that first one being appeared in the midst of the light, and that then another being appeared like unto the first. And Alexander Nabar, when in Nauvoo, he said Joseph told him that that's when that individual was there, had the second individual come by him and appeared right to his side, which then would make sense when the father would turn and introduce Joseph to his only begotten son by saying, "This is my beloved son, hear him." In the Wentworth letter, there's another part that Joseph shares, and that is that he indicated that those two personages exactly resembled one another.
Later that morning, when Joseph walked away from the grove of trees near his home, he knew more about God the Father, His Son Jesus Christ, and God's plan for the salvation of mankind than any other living soul.
Joseph Smith was given the mission throughout his entire life to reintroduce the world to the true Messiah. That his knowledge had been lost and sometimes debated about the nature of God. And over the course of many, many years, Joseph begins with the first vision to reintroduce Father in Heaven's children to who He is. That one, He is a being that has a body, that He's in the form of a man, that we were created in His image, and that His Son Jesus Christ is a separate being from Him and also was created and given a body in mortality, created in the image of His Father in heaven.
He said he felt a peace that was really not describable. And just think of the experience of this young boy, 14 years of age, who went into the grove, saw the Father and saw the Son, learned his sins were forgiven, learned about the atonement of the Savior. No wonder after he felt a peace that was really indescribable, that continued for days. But you don't learn this from just reading one of the accounts. You have to read all the accounts, put them together, and recognize that this harmony enables us to gain a much better understanding of this significant event Joseph Smith's first vision.
President Joseph F. Smith, who was the prophet Joseph Smith's nephew, he was the son of Hiram Smith, Joseph's brother, and the sixth president of the church, spoke about the importance of the first vision. He said, "The greatest event that has ever occurred in the world since the resurrection of the Son of God from the tomb and his ascension on high was the coming of the Father and the Son to that boy, Joseph Smith, to prepare the way for the laying of the foundation of his kingdom, not the kingdom of man, never more to cease nor to be overturned. Having accepted this truth, I find it easy to accept of every other truth that he enunciated and declared during his mission of 14 years in the world."
After long centuries of relying on the written testimony of ancient prophets and apostles, as recorded in the Holy Bible, another could testify that he had seen God with his own eyes. For those who live in the latter days, all other events pale in significance to the bright splendor of the Father and the Son appearing to the young boy, Joseph Smith, Jr.